Hello and welcome to Incorruptible Mass. Our mission is to help you understand state politics. So we talk a lot about why it is so broken, what we can have here in Massachusetts if we fixed it, and how you can get involved. And today we have a super exciting, excellent, amazing candidate, Timmy Sullivan, who will be talking about his campaign and all the things that he will be fighting for. But first, let me go ahead and introduce my co-host, Jordan Berg Powers. Jordan?
I'm Jordan Berg Powers. I use he, him, and I have several years experience in progressive politics.
To say the least. I am Anna Callahan, she, her, coming at you from Medford. And I also have been super intrigued by and devoting myself to fixing Massachusetts politics for a bit, let's put it that way. So Timmy, we would love to hear a little bit about you and also about why you are running for state representative.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Timmy Sullivan, he, him. This is my second time on the podcast, my first time as a candidate. So really glad to be back in this new capacity with you all.
First time questioner, long time listener, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. I have listened to all the content. Avid podcast listener. So that's what I do when I'm folding the laundry, is I listen to the Incorruptible Mass podcast. And I find they're actually really helpful for me to listen back to, which I think has to do with like the time of them being 20 to 25 minutes, means that I can listen to them a couple of times through, which has been good in sort of keeping up that education. Yeah, I am running for state representative in the 21st Middlesex district. That is Burlington, Bedford, and now precinct 6 of Lexington. It looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, you paused it perfectly because I forgot that before introing you, I was just going to say one quick plug that we have an event on July 24th, 10:30 a.m. in JP. It's at the Jamaica Pond. The Jamaica Pond Boathouse, which is 507 Jamaica Way. You will hear from Timmy. You will hear from all of our other candidates. We're going to have at least 11, maybe 13 candidates there speaking in person, coming out. It's going to be amazing. Sorry to interrupt you, Timmy. Timmy Sullivan.
All good. I hope to see everyone possible in person there. To get the syntax correct. Yeah, I'm running for state representative because I feel like we are at a real crisis point in politics, in Massachusetts, in our country, globally. And I mean, in my district, like it's the case for a lot because Massachusetts has the least competitive elections in the country. We have not had options at the ballot for a decade. I'm running in the first Democratic primary that Burlington and Bedford have seen in 10 years since our incumbent first took office. So this is a really important opportunity to just get folks re-engaged in our political and democratic process, to be talking about what are the policies that we want representing us, especially on all of these things that people are being choked on right now. Like, you know, I'm thinking about the economy and what working people are going through in order to just afford to live in our state. I'm thinking about, you know, education and rising education costs. Massachusetts has the fastest growing average of student debt for public college students specifically of any state in the country. That's horrible. And in a place like the education state, I think about climate. We are really at the end of the road on climate action here, right? And the Massachusetts legislature still has not passed meaningful climate legislation in this session, which is terrifying. We are seeing these extreme weather events that some of our best scientists predicted wouldn't be happening for another decade are already happening right now, which means that we are long overdue for really, really dramatic investments in life-saving programs that are also good for our climate. You know, these are things that I'm thinking about, and not seeing that kind of leadership represented, seeing the opportunity to get a lot more everyday people who I know also care and believe about these issues, also involved in our process, to say that we deserve better and we know that we can have better in the state, was really one of the things that compelled me to get involved. And so that we're able to have this campaign and have conversations every single day at the doors with folks about education costs and universal programs that cover people, about healthcare, about affordable housing, about investments in green jobs and public renewable energy and water. Burlington also perennially has a water crisis. So, you know, and what it means to have a vibrant democracy in Massachusetts. That's another thing that we talk about at the doors. You know, the transparency issues that listeners of the show are probably well aware of by now, the lack of participation, how we increase access to the information that goes on in our state house, how we increase voter participation, how we democratize how power operates in our state government. These are all really great conversations that I'm really proud to be a part of every day in this district.
Can you talk more about the water issues in Bedford?
Yeah, totally. So this is something that residents are so familiar with that the senior class president for Burlington High School at the graduation made reference to this in his speech about the perennial drought that Burlington experiences. And so this has to do with, one, rising climate, right? Like that we are experiencing drought has everything to do with how we treat or mistreat our natural resources. And so because we are constantly experiencing drought, there are always water bans. Every single year in my district, there are water bans that limit people's use on water because we need to preserve access to that resource because it's consistently dwindling. And we're seeing that that's not a problem that's going away. And I doubt that that is something that, right, is magically going to be solved without some sort of dramatic kind of intervention. The other problem that we're experiencing with water, which is something that only started to get tested a couple of years ago, is the level of PFAS in our drinking water, which is like chemical runoffs from people are using like lawn care, or I think there's some like clothing materials or like shampoos or things that have chemicals that run off into our water supply. Where I live has elevated levels of these contaminants in the drinking water. And so the town issues these statements and basically says, if you're not immunocompromised, it's fine, which still feels like a terrifying prospect to me, to be having anyone be having this level of exposure to water, right?
Don't look at the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, right. It seems kind of outrageous to me. And there's not really a great plan that I see, especially coming from our state legislature, to help and support folks in our district in getting access to clean water. And so that's something that I've been thinking a lot more about, and I've been talking with folks a lot more about also, of what it can mean to have state backing in our district to ensure that there's clean water access, and to do things that are also investing in our water. So Burlington has a partnership, I think it's the MWRA, that brings like 1 million gallons of clean potable water into Burlington, but that's not nearly enough to like meet our water demand. So one of the things that I'm an advocate for is investing in water capture programs so that we can treat like rainwater or recycled water to be able to use for things that are basically any of our other water usage that wouldn't be drinking. So we can preserve as much of our limited potable drinking water for drinking, and not on anything else that we would be using for plumbing. The other is just investing in water treatment also, that we basically have left it up to residents to say, if you can afford at-home water treatment, we encourage you to do so. And if you can't, well, sorry, like that just feels unacceptable to me. Like that's that comma of if you can't, comma, that's exactly the government intervention point. But so far we just have hands thrown up. And then of course, like I'm always a believer in root cause. So like we also have to target everything that is contaminating the water, or look at policies that are causing this sort of perennial drought on our resources in general. So this is something that feels really, really pertinent to a lot of folks right now. And so this is something I'm learning a lot more about, and having a lot more conversations with people, and integrating that into a more comprehensive plan for climate in the district.
Yeah, I love how, I think really excellent candidates are people who think both about, they deeply understand the problems in their district that are unique to their communities, but they also think about the broad, like statewide, even international, but like statewide level policies that can be done. And I would love it if you talk just a little bit more about your background working with Phenom
Sure.
on education policy, because to me, that's part of what makes you as a candidate so exciting, is that you've done statewide work already on state policy. So if you want to go ahead and give us a little bit of info on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. So Phenom is the public higher education network of Massachusetts. And we are a collective, or a network, I guess, of public college faculty, staff, students, alumni, this broad tent organization of stakeholders in our public college system. And what our sort of central campaign focus for the last couple of years has been is winning debt-free public college as a right of all residents in Massachusetts. So for almost the last 2 years, I've been the executive director at this organization. And then prior to serving in that capacity, while I was an undergraduate at UMass Amherst, I was doing student organizing with Phenom. So for about the last 6 years, I've been working on this issue of student debt and access to our public colleges. And this is something, both important to me politically and also very important to me personally. Free public college was one of the first issues that I got involved with when I turned voting age and started to think about, what are some voting issues that are important to me. One, because I want to be a teacher. That's always something I've known about myself. And so I rank education as very, very important to me. And I've never understood the arbitrary cutoff of our promising of education at grade 12. That's just like, that has never clicked for me. So in one sense, there's like a lot of political importance. The other is that my freshman year of college, I had many, many, many people that I knew who, after our first year, had to drop out of UMass Amherst because they couldn't afford to be there anymore.
Wow.
And these are folks who took on enormous amounts of student debt, who were priced out of what our state purports to be a public system, priced out of. It's really horrible. And, that we see with tuition and fees going up every single year, as they have been for the last 2 decades, that's the reality for more and more folks in our Commonwealth, is that it is unaffordable for you to get a public college degree. And like I mentioned earlier, public college students in Massachusetts specifically have more debt than private college students. What I mean by that is the average dollar amount is larger for public college graduates in student debt than private college graduates.
What?
And there are more public college graduates with debt than private college graduates in Massachusetts, the education system.
This is blowing both of our minds. Like, we cannot wrap our minds around how much of a failure has our legislature's large divestment from public education been, that better exemplified by that mind-blowing thing.
Seriously.
And that is bleeping crazy.
Yes. And it's new, right? And this is the thing that I like always harp back on is this happened over the course of my lifetime. So my mom, for example, went to UMass Boston. She graduated. She was first generation, low income student, first in her entire family to go to college, and did so as a single parent. And she graduated from UMass Boston with a nursing degree. My family saw a lot of economic mobility from that, right? She got an education she really wanted. She got to be a nurse and give back in the community in that kind of way. And the reason that was all possible for her against what now we see as all of these obstacles to obtaining your degree is because in the 90s, the state decided that students like my mom were worth investing in, and that public schools like UMass Boston were worth investing in. And it was better for all of us if we helped folks get an education. And that mentality has shifted. Since 2001, we have seen such dramatic cuts from our state government to funding for public colleges. And all of that cost is pushed onto tuition and fees, and then in turn, debt financing, right? Turning to student debt. I have $32,750 of student debt for a UMass education, and that was my most affordable option. Like, it's outrageous to even call that affordable because Evidently not if I have $37,000 of debt. And yeah, so this is an issue that I really care about and have gotten to work on with Phenom for a while. And I've seen also, I've come to appreciate how stagnant our state government is on everything other than slashing public services. It seems like when it comes to slashing public services, there's like an ambition there, but when it comes to actually delivering for the public, there's a lot of stagnancy. So this bill that would guarantee public education as a right to residents in the education state has sat and died in committee for 6 years every time that it is filed. And it has, even one year, and I think it was the last session, it had 2/3 sponsorship of the committee it was stuck in, but could not be reported favorably out of committee. And that never made sense to me.
Yeah, let's just repeat that, right? It's in a committee, 2/3 of the people in the committee officially co-sponsor the bill, and the committee votes no to not put the bill forward. Like, unbelievable that these things can happen.
Yes. And that, I remember that drove me crazy. And that was at a time also when myself and a couple other organizers at our campus, we had a sit-in outside of Senate President Spilka and then Speaker Bob DeLeo's offices to talk about the crisis of student debt and why we needed them to prioritize investment in our public college system. And that was one of the things that when we were sitting in, that we were doing research on, of like, what are the bottlenecks of this bill? And seeing that the committee itself, a committee that overwhelmingly supported the legislation, was itself a bottleneck, never made sense to me, until I learned from our good friends at Act on Mass that because the committee process is opaque, it is not public to us. Committee votes are private. Massachusetts is the legislature that allows representatives to keep their voting record private, and that our legislators are the one group of public employees who have exempted themselves from public records law. Once I understood all of that, and that co-sponsorship is used to outwardly signal support, but once the opportunity to privately vote on a committee is presented, a lot of that public-facing support diminishes. That's when I finally understood what was going on there. And I saw it in my home district also. So the incumbent that I'm running against at this point in time that I'm talking about, we got him to become a co-sponsor on the legislation. This past session, prior to me running, had tried for these last 2 years to get him to recommit his support for the legislation he previously committed to. And he would not. Told me he did not believe in the piece of legislation, that it is regressive and doesn't actually deliver for folks, that it's outlandish. And the only thing that I could try to figure out what has changed between then and now is that he's a chairman of a committee.
And remind us again what the bill is.
The bill is to guarantee that people can go to public college without accruing student debt.
Yeah, think about that. I just want people to like understand what we're talking about, right? Like, you have our legislators, I don't actually know what his position is, but essentially their position when they're not in power is to support things that they know won't pass, so that they can tell us what we want to hear. And they can go into the public, they can knock on a door and say, I support these things. And then when they have opportunities to actually legislate positive change in people's lives, then all of a sudden the excuses come out, the things come out, and the answer really is, well, the speaker doesn't let me do it, and I don't want to push them. We don't know if he supports it, or we have no idea whether or not your legislator supports or doesn't support this bill. What we know is that they will do what it takes to be in power and to stay in power. That is the only through line to their positions. And this is true for affordable housing. This is true for healthcare. This is true for the environment. They only do enough to stay in power, right? Or to get in power. And it's not they're not centering us. They're not thinking about, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for the regular people who can't afford to live here, can't get around, are worried about climate change, and are worried about the future of our jobs?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And you know, the other thing this is sparking my memory that like at one point I looked up this particular incumbent that you are running against, Timmy, and this person in I think the 2017 session, in one of the sessions at least, had a 100% identical voting record to the Speaker of the House. And, you know, we talk like transparency, people have begun talking about transparency, but transparency is simply an enabler for the deeper problems in the State House that is the near dictatorial control that the Speaker has over the way that state reps vote.
Yes.
And so, you know, we have a huge problem of lack of democracy in the State House. We do not have a democratic State House at all, or else a lot of these policies would pass. And, you know, what you're talking about in terms of the committee, like 2/3 of the committee members co-sponsor the bill and then they vote against the bill. So obviously, I mean, we don't know who, because untransparent, that enables it. But like this all happens because they have to do whatever the Speaker tells them to do. Heard this just yesterday from a couple of former state reps that I was hanging out with. And that is such a deep cultural and incentive problem at the State House.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we have to change, and that our campaign is seeking to change. I'm the only candidate in this race who has signed the Voters Deserve to Know pledge, which pledges that my votes will be made public. I will stand for roll call votes so that things like that will be recorded. If I am leading a committee, although I doubt I would be appointed to one because I don't see myself falling in line with the Speaker, that I would make that committee process transparent. And that really resonates with folks. Unanimously, every single door that we knock, we talk about the transparency issue. And firstly, voters are shocked that that's permitted, that's even something that's happening. And then secondly, really frustrated that our incumbent has voted to preserve that right to keep his constituents in the dark.
Yes.
And that is unanimously, even people that I talk to who are supporting and going to vote for the incumbent, we still have really good conversations about the need for transparency. And we make sure to end each of those conversations with that person knowing that the next time they go and speak with the incumbent, they're going to bring up this transparency issue. That's how deeply that it resonates with folks, that even his own supporters have calls to action from our campaign that they are promising to fulfill by meeting with him and encouraging a change on that kind of vote.
Amazing. So I want to jump in and talk about something that you and I have talked about a little bit before. And it's one of the things that I'm most excited about your candidacy. So I feel like in today's post-Roe America, that people, even the most sort of blue, no matter who folks, are beginning to feel frustrated with the inability of our government to take action. Like, I mean, it is so clear that like 2/3 more of Americans thought that Roe, which you know was not like that Roe was appropriate and that there should be access to abortions. Like, you know, there's a lot of details on the edges, but like that is overwhelmingly popular. And the fact that we have had warnings for years, for decades, you know, 2 solid months of like literally a leaked decision, and yet nothing, there's complete inaction from our government. And it's incredibly frustrating. And I think, you know, Jordan and I, and with Jonathan Cohn, like we've spent a year on this podcast talking about the sort of deeply disturbing inability of our state government to take action on anything. That really what happens is just the complete obstruction. And that's what the Speaker and leadership's job is to do, is to obstruct any policies, any bills from passing that would actually help us. And you have talked about some incredible ways that we as constituents, but especially as a legislator, ways that a legislator can find solutions and make solutions happen for real in people's lives, even when government refuses to take action, which is exciting because, you know, you're going to be in a state house, and if we're lucky, we have like 8 or 10 other amazing people like you who are in there, but there's 160 people in there, and we're not going to be able to pass all these policies we want to pass in the first year. So while we are still changing the state house, you have some amazing ideas on how things can be accomplished even without the state government, and I would love to hear more about that.
Yes, definitely. So the example I give is a climate example, and it is something that I learned when I was doing research during my undergraduate degree in Puerto Rico. I had the enormous privilege to go to Puerto Rico and meet with folks who were doing community organizing and mutual aid work as a response to the devastation of Hurricane Maria. And that is where my mind really was open to a lot of different ways to plug into change making, to think about a community immediately taking action to like sustain itself, and how we just, you know, see immediately that there is a problem and can mobilize our people to get to work on implementing solutions, right? And this is something that was an ethos at when I was doing that research. Something I would hear all the time was "Solo el pueblo salva el pueblo," which is only the people are coming for the people, right? Only the people are going to save the people. So taking this sort of ethos, one of the things that I was learning about was community-based microgrids. And the analogy I give for what a microgrid is, it's an energy grid, right? And I think about holiday lights, the like old version of holiday lights, where if one bulb went off, the whole string is dead, right? That's our current energy system. And that was the energy system in Puerto Rico. When Hurricane Maria came, it wiped off the grid and everybody lost power for months. This is something that we are currently susceptible to also with respect to natural disasters. What a microgrid is a small pocket of self-sustaining grid that has the option to plug into a larger grid to send and receive from. And so I liken that to like the new holiday lights, that if one bulb goes out, the rest of the string stays on, right? So if something happens and wipes out the grid, other pockets of the community can still have access to their electricity. They can send and receive electricity from other parts of the grid, et cetera. So it's really great in terms of resiliency. What a community-based renewable microgrid is that the community has come together to collectively install public utilities generated by renewable energy to form this microgrid.
And this is what happened. This isn't a theory, right? You were there when they did this in Puerto Rico. And talk a little bit about how did they do it?
Yes, so I was watching after this was already installed in for some folks, and there's a lot of really like great material. I recommend people go and, oh my gosh, sorry, a gigantic, I'm outside for people doing a video and a giant beetle just like landed on me.
Check out the YouTube to see it.
Yes, check out the YouTube for the special effects. So I was talking with leaders in the aftermath because I was there in 2020. So a lot of some of this, the installment of the actual solar grids had happened already. So I talked to people about like, how did this happen? And for the groups that I had met with, they were mostly crowdfunding for the technology for solar panels, and then just started installing them within the community. And then these are energy is being generated and people have access to it. It's quite simple. It's a very true small d democracy project that was being run, right? And I think Casa Pueblo is a great organization to look at that has been doing a lot of really great environmental justice work in Puerto Rico for many, many decades. And they have solar campaign that they're running to get Puerto Rico to be energy independent through the sort of community-based microgrid kind of project. And so, yeah, you really just create local energy, allow people to plug into it, and the community becomes energy sustaining in that kind of way. And that was really brilliant to see, right? Devastating in that, like, because of the colonial relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States, unfortunately, like, what was offered was Donald Trump throwing paper towels at people.
So this grew out of a reality where the national and state governments were just doing nothing. People were, yes. You were saying that people were out of power for, some people an entire year, yes. month after month after month, waiting for the government to take action in this crisis emergency, and yes. nothing happened. And that's where only the people will say the people, and where these efforts came out of.
Yes, exactly, right. And so I thought that was really fantastic to witness, right, of how people can exercise that sort of democratic principle in their own life. And this is an ethos that then I take to my politics now, and then especially if I'm going for this position, one that I take to the campaign and my theory of governance, which is really an expanded version of politics and democracy that is way beyond election day.
Yes.
But that is like yes. a full 365 days a year kind of thing that we're all engaged with, right? Like my definition of politics and democracy is that is every individual having a say over the conditions that impact their life, right? And that's an all the time thing that's happening. So how do we create opportunities for that to consistently be an all the time practice? And so for me, I think about, okay, Massachusetts and the world has this energy mandate of we have got to transition to 100% renewable energy. Like, that is a scientific mandate, that is a non-negotiable, that is a non-negotiable for me, for this campaign. And everything that we've talked about how corruption and concentration of power works in the state government, I'm under no illusions that, suddenly we get elected and the speaker has an epiphany and everything has changed and like we're doing all this investment.
What? That's not gonna happen.
So what we have to think of a theory of, what is the theory of change, right? And one of those things for me is absolutely keep and continue fighting at the state level for the policies we need, because I see climate change as a matter of these larger scale political economy. And while we're doing that, there is the opportunity to take local action. And what I mean by that is I'm inspired by this municipal microgridding program. And I think my district has a great opportunity to do this. And it's something that when we get into a deeper canvas at the doors, residents are really, really interested by. So what I'm proposing is to bring money into the district to create a microgrid of solar, and have this be a public energy utility that is now cheaper for people also, because we're seeing people's costs go up for energy. So having a cheaper option to get people onto a green grid and having that be a municipal public renewable program for people. And my district has an amazing opportunity for that, because we have this gigantic commercial sector that takes up like this whole section of where I live. That's just malls and shopping centers and restaurants and business office parks and parking lots. And so when I talk about solar with some people, immediately the number one piece of resistance I get is the complications of rooftop solar, right? And also not wanting to deal with that sort of leasing to Eversource or National Grid or whoever is actually putting then like Eversource's property on their roof. And so I think this is also a great way to get underneath a lot of that, because we have this whole area of the community that is just baking in sun all day.
And they would love to have their cars covered with solar panels, right? Just cover everything. Solar panels on top, right? Everybody's happy. Their car is shaded. Yeah. You got square mile, tons of square miles of solar panels covering everything. It's amazing.
And we can do it, right? We can do it. That this is transitioning to renewable energy. This is creating cheaper energy cheaper energy options for people. It's getting around the problems that they see about like this individual response to solar, having to be like this private leasing on their rooftop. And it's actually getting to work. And I think providing a model for other communities around the state to either start adopting for them to pressure their legislator to start adopting. And then also creates conditions where it's like, whoa, okay, if we can see that the sort of, the people realize they don't need us mentality anymore, of like, if these policies are getting out from under us because these representatives from the incorruptible slate are just going in improving the conditions of their life without the way that power operates within the state house, we've completely undermined the logic of that power relationship and can start instituting something different for our
Yes. Brilliant. And just to tie in this, because I know you and I have talked about this a bunch, you've talked about like Markey is such an environmental champion, might be able to find national funds to fund some project like this. So we're not necessarily talking about crowdfunding from people, but there are relationships you can build between our national representatives and our municipalities. That's another area where state representatives can, you know, work together with local representatives and with national representatives to like find funding to, you know, appropriate whatever it might be, like resources and other things to make things happen.
100%.
And it's super exciting.
Yeah, it has never made sense to me why our multiple levels of government aren't working in communion with one another. And I think this is one of those sorts of policies that opens it up for us to have this sort of if I see myself as the interlocker at the state level, right? We have a federal delegation who is talking big game on climate politics up there and has a lot more money they can bring into the district. And then we also are going to need our local elected officials to help and enact and create and sustain some of this. And so that opens up pathways for that 3 level of government communication to start to be playing more of a role in people's lives also, because right now we're so separated. And I think that's only to the community's detriment.
Yeah. Jordan, is this the first time you've heard of some of these concepts, or is this something you already have chatted with Timmy about?
No, but we've talked about it actually on the podcast, like the important, like the ability of, you know, very simply for like regular folks, I say all the time, like we have the technology today, right at this moment, without changing anything, to power almost everybody's ability to get around, and also their own electronics from their roofs, and maybe some wind in their back, like on attached to a house, and certainly with some wind either in a neighborhood or in a local in a large field, right? Like we have the technology between all of these things to just do it, and the only reason we don't is will. Right? Like we could do tomorrow, we could, and it would be a huge jobs program, right? Like we can employ all sorts of people that we think are unemployable and really put people to work. We do it tomorrow.
Right on. Oh, such an amazing conversation, Timmy. We're super excited about your campaign. And we look forward to seeing you on Sunday. And thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next week.
Bye. Thank you so much.